Okay, hi everyone. Welcome to the research workshop series at the Medical Center Library. This is part 3 of the horrors of bad research, and we are talking about AI. So our presentation is it's alive, issues with artificial intelligence. Today, I'm going to be presenting. I'm going to be presenting with my colleague Rebecca Morgan. I'll let her introduce herself. And while we're introducing ourselves, the slides, there's a QR code there in the right corner you can use to get access to the slides. Everything is clickable and linkable in the slides. They will also be sent in a follow-up email, and they should be put in the chat as well. So Becky, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Rebecca Morgan. I am one of the health sciences librarians here at UK's Medical Center Library, and I primarily liaise with the College of Dentistry and the College of Pharmacy.
And I did not introduce myself, so I'll introduce myself now. My name is Lauren Robinson. I'm the Associate Director of Research Services at the Medical Center Library, and I primarily liaise with the College of Medicine. So today's overview. So artificial intelligence is an ever-growing presence in our lives. It has its benefits, but however, it has its misunderstandings so there are misunderstandings of generative AI and the limitations that it has. Today, we'll be discussing the proper and improper application of generative AI in health sciences research and how it's impacting health sciences literature.
So to open the presentation, let's make sure that we're all on the same page about what we mean by generative AI and large language models, which are the basis of generative AI. So large language models are a type of AI or artificial intelligence that uses deep learning algorithms to perform what is called natural language processing. And basically, these large language models are trained on huge amounts of data to learn relationships and acquire language generation, and that is where generative AI comes from. And they basically gain the ability to summarize and output information in natural language. And so simply put, generative AI is designed to produce something new, a summary or an output that is based on its previous experience, its extensive training. But it is essentially done through mimicry. It is mimicking a natural language. And we use dialogue agents such as ChatGPT, Bard, Quillbot to interact with these large language models. So ever since ChatGPT launched in 2022, these tools, these chatbots, have almost immediately been adopted as research tools. And there's just been a plethora of articles that you come across everywhere in biomedical literature about how you can integrate them into your research or into your clinical practice even. But it still remains very much the Wild West out there in regards to how you can safely and ethically apply them as a tool in biomedicine. And it really begs the question of why is this tool so popular? And this is the heart of the title of our presentation. And it seems so simple, but really it's because it seems like it's alive, or at least acts like it is. Researchers from the Oxford Internet Institute say that people have become so trusting so quickly of these models because they view them as a human-like resource. And this quote from Brent Mittelstadt, who's the director of the Oxford Internet Institute, sums it up, where he says that, this is in part due to the design of these large language models, because they are helpful and human-sounding agents that converse with us, and they answer seemingly any question with confident-sounding, well-written text. So they are almost these oracle-type tools where we can ask them any question and they give us an answer, and that allows us to almost trust them a little more than we necessarily should. And in the next box, LaTanya Sweeney from Harvard University talks about the fact that this is very much a realization of something that humans have strived for a long time. It's almost the science fiction realization of software that is finally performing these tasks that would normally require human intelligence to execute. And generative AI is essentially seeming to create something that didn't exist before. And as humans, we think of ourselves as the only creatures, the only beings that can create something new. And generative AI is the closest we've come to seeming like, oh, this thing is creating something completely new out of nothing. And it's not really doing that. Remember, it's only mimicking, but it seems like it is. And that's so enticing to us that it's created this widespread, almost immediate adaptation, even in biomedical research. So what's the problem with it? If we go back to one of the quotes that we had very early on when we were talking about what large language models are, we talked about how it is trained on large amounts of data to learn relationships and acquire this language generation. So that should really cause you to pause and ask, well, what's it being trained on? And how is it being trained? And can this data it's being trained on and the methods that are being used to train it be trusted? So what's it being trained on? That's actually a really good question. And just again, as a reminder, chatbots cannot think like humans, despite the fact that they mimic so well. They do not actually understand what they say. They are only scraping the internet and kind of spitting back out what they've learned. And so that makes where they pull information very, very important. But unfortunately, people who've tried to study where these chatbots are getting their data have found the companies that create them really do not want to make clear what they're being trained on, because they're very afraid of, they don't even want to disclose it or even necessarily look at it themselves, because they're so afraid of finding protected information, copyrighted material, or information that has been grabbed without consent. And ChatGPT in particular has not disclosed at all what data sets it's used to train its models. We know only that it's a mix of social media, books, web pages, some research documents, but what web pages, what research documents, where they were acquired, what social media, we really have no idea what. Google C4, however, which powers Google's AI and Facebook's Llama AI, the Washington Post did a deep investigation into what websites, at least, they indexed, and we are going to take a look at what they found, because that sheds some light into how these chatbots are trained. And it might be a little alarming, actually, because the top 3 sites that were indexed were Patents, Wikipedia, and then Scribd, which is just kind of an open source, anybody can post anything. Sometimes it's research, sometimes it's just whatever people want to post, kind of free writing site. Also, a pirated ebooks site that has since been seized by the government is also in the top 27 websites, along with a lot of other pirated resources. And that leads to the number 2 content, which is actually a lot of stuff taken without consent. So this is a big problem for a lot of artists and writers. There's a lot of stuff that has been taken that people are not consenting to, that is just being pulled in from these chatbots. And there's even voter registration material and copyrighted material being pulled in as well. Number 3, it's all social media and personal blogs. And they say technology makes up 15% of the categorized sites, but when they say technology, they're actually talking about like Tumblr and WordPress and Blogspot. But most alarmingly, despite the fact that it had filters on, it still pulled a significant amount of data that was findable from neo-Nazi sites like Stormfront and 4chan, and really harmful sites like Kiwi Farms and message boards known for organizing targeted harassment campaigns against individuals. So this is really biased information that is being pulled into these data sets that are training these chatbots. And so that raises some significant problems, because there's an extreme lack of transparency about what data is being used to actually train these large language models and these chatbots. The Washington Post also only figured out the websites the Google set was trained on. They have no idea what other documents were used and what was trained on. So it's still a big untransparent mess. And as we talked about, a lot of the stuff that was included on the web pages can definitely create biases. There are many websites that are not appropriate for research that were included in. I would say the majority of them probably were, and that risks adding bias, sometimes extreme bias, into the chatbot's response. There's also issues with how the chatbots are being trained. They're being trained using reward modeling or reinforcement learned from human feedback. And to the right, you can see OpenAI's visual explanation of ChatGPT's reinforcement learning for human feedback, which is basically their process of interacting with the tool, having human trainers interact with it to get it to basically yield what they view as the correct response by rewarding it. So basically, the chatbot learns the correct response by getting a positive response from a human. So all its answers for what is correct comes directly from human feedback. And this can be a problem because it leads to something called reward hacking. And this is a phenomenon in machine learning where the model learns to exploit the reward system to basically achieve a high score without genuinely solving the problem. So basically, it figures out what you want and gives you the answer that sounds right without necessarily giving the right answer. So it might give the right answer, I don't know, even 90% of the time, but it's going to lean more towards giving what sounds right than what is actually right. Because remember, this is a tool that is based on mimicry, not actual knowledge. And reward hacking leads to hallucinations or false answers from the chatbot that might seem correct, especially to a non-expert, because again, they mimic what sounds like a plausible answer. And this leads to biasing. And I know there's a lot of talk about how, oh, we're working with the chatbots to get rid of hallucinations, but there's still a major problem. And here is an example that we have received in our own library, where we've had a patron contact us and said, oh, I've gotten this list of citations from, I believe it was ChatGPT, and you know, they seem great, they seem exactly what I'm looking for, but I can't find them anywhere. And just glancing at them, they do look right. You can look at these titles of journals and they all seem correct. The titles don't seem ridiculous. The authors don't seem ridiculous. And even if you look up the years and the volumes and the issues, most of them actually match what they should be. But they're all hallucinated, every single one of them. And one big red flag is the fact that Pediatric Blood and Cancer for the year 2007, volume 48, issue 2, excuse me, for the same page numbers, it lists 2 different articles of that same string. So obviously there's a big problem there. That should be an immediate red flag. But ChatGPT and these chatbots are getting much better at hallucinating these citations to look much more realistic in a way that at first glance, you might just assume are reliable. And they're even getting more advanced than that. This is an example of an article. This article is another example, which is entitled Cautionary Tale for Biomedical Researchers. In this case, these experts just on a whim asked ChatGPT about a topic they were well acquainted with and got an answer about the distance ticks travel before laying eggs, something they knew very much about, and it gave an answer that they thought was wrong. They asked it to generate a citation for them. This is the answer that they got. And this citation looked extremely good to them. It even linked a DOI to them. And more than that, they were aware of some of these authors. They knew them as fellow experts in this field, and they knew that this journal was a journal that they had published in. So this looked them as experts as a very valid citation. But there's a couple of big problems. The DOI was a dead link. It just generated a fake link. And when they actually contacted the authors that they knew, they all claimed that they had nothing to do with this study and they knew that this data was false. So it's kind of alarming to think that these authors potentially have a ghost citation floating around, or they could have a ghost citation floating around, or any researcher or expert in the field could have a ghost citation floating around if ChatGPT knows you're an expert and just wants to hallucinate something that it thinks that you could back up. So that's a scary thing that could be happening now in biomedical research. And despite the claim that the newer issues or the newer versions of ChatGPT are only pulling hallucinations at a rate of about 6%, this study at least found that ChatGPT, or GPT-4 at least, was still hallucinating at a rate of 28.6%. So that is significantly higher than the 6% that is being claimed out there by various people. That's an improvement over the nearly 40% of GPT 3.5, but that's still an unacceptable rate of hallucination, especially for something like a systematic review or a lit review. And if you look at the recall rate for relevant papers, it's only 13% for GPT-4. It's only finding 13% of relevant papers on a topic. That should, again, be unacceptable for what is a successful or an exhaustive search on this topic. And what if you use your own data? So let's say you're not relying on what the chatbot already knows, what the data it's already been trained on. You load your own data into it, but asks it to interpret it. The AI will likely still need extensive training to understand what it is and how to process it, because AIs are only as good as the training they receive and the quality of data they receive. And we like to think data is unbiased, but it can actually be very biased, and that adds a whole other layer of problems to this issue. Because AIs are already being trained on biased data, and then that creates a whole other vicious cycle where these biases are reinforced instead of broken. We already know that biomedical data has some serious limitations, and when AI is trained on it, it can lead to even more serious issues. And in this one study about large language models propagating race-based media, they found some pretty alarming stuff. In particular, ChatGPT, GPT-4, Bard, and Claude, which are all major chatbots, were asked a series of questions about race-based science, and they all gave answers that were debunked and very inappropriate. ChatGPT, GPT-4, Bard, and Claude all responded that there's some degree of difference in skin thickness between races, which is very erroneous. Both ChatGPT or GPT 3.5 and GPT-4 had runs that tried to justify race-based medicine with false assertions that Black people have different muscle mass and therefore higher creatine levels. And these large language models are already being integrated into health record systems to help answer questions, and that's pretty alarming. So that should give pause to anybody considering using these tools for research purposes without really thinking how and why they're going to be used. Now, it should be mentioned that these biases have been shown that they can be trained out of these tools as well. But it takes extensive work, and it takes first identifying that these biases exist. So it can happen, but you first have to, one, be well aware that they exist, even with their own data that you're entering in. And two, you have to go through the trouble of figuring out how to work it out of the system and train it out of the system, which is a long, hard process in and of itself as well.
So what is our recommendation? We recommend using AI for its language and processing power and not its knowledge. So here are some good examples of people who are doing that. So there was an article in 2023, an independent biologist from the UK spent several months looking at hundreds of papers in a journal and looking for duplicate images. So this is this researcher often goes into publications and tries to find duplicative images or images that have been edited, and identify those to the journals and the researchers, because sometimes it happens by accident and sometimes it is malicious, but his goal is to go and do that. So he did this study where he looked at papers and then he ran them through an AI tool, and he was able to find 63 papers, and the AI tool found those 63. But in addition, the AI tool found 41 additional papers that he missed. So this shows that AI can be used in a positive way. So the tool he actually used was ImageTwin, and it's used by universities and publishers and other scientific societies. And so you can upload your images, and it runs it against 25 million images from other publications and looks for duplicates. So it's a really cool tool that you all could use. It does involve pricing, but you can use it to find tools. So this is a good way that people are using AI. Another one, so this one was just recently announced on October 9th of this year. So the Nobel Prize in Chemistry went to 3 scientists for AlphaFold, which is a AI tool, and they imported their own data set on different protein structures, so that you used to be able to visualize proteins, and it would take months, years to develop those visualizations. But now, using AI, they've been able to speed up that process. So as it says here, it speeds up a months or year-long process to mere hours or minutes. So they've been able to find almost every known protein structure in theory based off this AI. So, and they use their own data again. So this is a good way that you can train an AI tool to solve problems. So some of these articles talk about there might be a protein in there that could develop an enzyme to break down plastic, things that could be really beneficial to the world moving forward. And I really like this quote from one of the laureates. They said that's always been my passion, talking about AI, but it's like any powerful general purpose technology. It can be used for harm as well if put in the wrong hands and used for the wrong ends. So how can we use AI responsibly? We can be skeptical. So when you're looking at it and using it for whatever research project you're working on, look and really be skeptical on how it's being used. Where's the information coming from? Or if it's building citations for you, is it putting those citations in the right location? And also consider harm. We have another slide in a moment that we're going to talk a little bit more about that, but that also includes the environmental harm, not just the research harm. And again, I'm going to reinforce, don't use it for knowledge. So don't ask it and take it at face value for an answer, right? Use it for its processing power. You can see that those good examples that I just gave used it for language or processing power to speed it up, not to give them the answer. So again, just don't use it for knowledge, and don't take the knowledge it's giving you at face value. So not just greenhouse gases. So I'll hand this off to Becky to talk a little bit more about the environmental harm.
Yeah, just to point out, one thing to always keep in mind with AI is that it does use a very large amount of natural resources in order to use. And we always think of, oh, okay, the carbon emissions that go along with it, when in fact, really need to think about the water as well. Researchers from the University of California basically worked out the idea that Microsoft's US data centers directly evaporated 700,000 liters of clean fresh water just to train GPT-3. And that global AI demand may be accountable for the equivalent of half the water withdrawal of the entire United Kingdom in 2027 alone. That's an insane amount of water being used up. Water scarcity already affects so many people, or approximately 2/3 of the global population. So the thought that this much water is going to be evaporated and used by AI increasingly as it is being used more and more and more is terrifying. And one example that is given in this paper is the fact that even when you use just a chat GPT prompt, it's like the equivalent of dumping out a cup of water on the ground. That is how much processing power it uses. So these are definitely considerations to take in when you are using these tools. They do have a direct, immediate impact into the world around us, as well as, providing a benefit. And that really needs to be weighed as well.
So as librarians, we want to talk a little bit about the difference between databases and AI. So library databases are different from AI, and they might seem more troublesome to search, but I want to talk a little bit about like the pros of it. So library databases are structured, they provide a way to search structured records that can be systematically searched and are reproducible, right? So that recall rate, we can recall what we searched, right? Which, as you saw earlier, is not really possible with AI at very high levels. You still, of course, have to appraise everything found in a library database, but you can be assured that they are real and that they exist. So like, it's not going to make up a citation for you. Everything inside of a database has been put in by publishers, by librarians. So it is real and it exists. You still have to appraise it, of course, because not everything in biomedical literature is good research. You still do have to appraise it, but it exists. And it also provides access to resources that are behind paywalls, and that therefore helps you reduce bias, right? So as we mentioned earlier, that there is inherent biases in the data sets that the AI are being trained on, right? But library databases don't have that. There are biases in the literature inside of library databases, of course, but you are getting to so much more information, and it is somewhat vetted for you already. So AI does not guarantee that it is real. It can hallucinate. And it is at the whim of the internet, right? It mimics, and its mimicry has gotten so advanced that it's easy to be duped by those citations, as you can see in some of the examples we talked about earlier. It's not transparent. And the internet in and of itself has tons of things. You can find whatever you want on the internet, right? And that's what these AI models are often being trained on. So it can even provide mis or disinformation. So you have to just be a better investigator when using AI. And that goes back to that point of being skeptical when you're using it. So another thing we get asked about more and more is systematic reviews and AI. So automation is a common topic when we're talking about advanced reviews. There's a lot of discussion happening around AI in order to speed up the evidence synthesis process. And again, you can see we're talking about speeding up the process, not doing the review for you. It's using it for that processing power, not its knowledge. So should we use AI to build searches, translate, select articles, citation chaining, or synthesizing data? So I would say it's not the answer to doing that. Again, it's about the processing speed. AI should be a tool, but it's not the answer for it. So there are tools available. We use these every single day when we're working on systematic reviews and other evidence syntheses. These include Yale Mesh Analyzer, DMP tool Protocol Builder. We have Rayon that also has built-in AI tools. We are currently in the process of launching Distiller SR, which has Daisy, which is an AI tool for full text and title abstract review that uses AI and different classifiers. You actually still have to train it, but then it's supposed to help you include and exclude articles at a much faster rate. Even Covidence is doing that in some way. It's using some forms of AI. It's not quite like what I was explaining with Daisy. It tries to, like, based off saying yes for inclusion, it tries to push the more likely things that it thinks as included articles toward the top. So you'll start including more and more articles that you're going through, and then at the end, you'll have more excluded. You still have to go through all of those, though there is research moving forward that at some point, AI might be able to help with those exclusion pieces after training. There's also SR Accelerator's Polyglot Search Translator and Search Refinery, and then there's Embase's Query Translator. Not all of these are based off AI, but a lot of them have AI pieces, and we are using these to increase the speed. It used to take us hours to translate searches, and we can do that in like a handful of hours now. It used to take me days, and now it doesn't. So maybe use AI to get search terms, but not as a reliable or accurate enough way to build or translate a search. Though there are some tools, like we said, that can help you with that. They still need your knowledge to sit down and review those, right? So it might translate a search, but you still have to review it. Like Embase Query Translator, I can put my PubMed search in there. It gives me my Embase search, but like it does mess up, right? Like I've had it, there's some terms in Mesh that are anded, and it will pull those apart and then make them title abstract searches inside of Embase. And that's not what I was wanting, right? So you have to still apply your own professional knowledge to these tools. And again, like I said, don't use AI for knowledge. Reviews still need a human touch to them. Also publishing. So this is becoming more of a topic of discussion, I think. So you want to consider the ethics. There are a couple of resources I've linked to here that provide more information about the ethics from some scientific societies on how to ethically and practically use AI in publishing articles. But there's also citation and transparency. So prior to incorporating generative AI tools into your research project, you want to make sure that there are provisions for citing and using that in whatever chosen journal you have or whatever intended journal you plan to publish in. Because publishers have different inclusion and different ways to like cite for AI. So like text and images creation, how do each journal or each publisher wants you to handle that, and if they will let you publish those things in their journals. And make sure you cite whatever resource you're using. So you could see that example I gave you earlier about Image Twin, like that citation was like in the article showing that that's the tool that researcher used to find all those duplicate and errored images. So just make sure you're citing and different citation styles are coming out with new citation like frameworks, I guess, for citing AI. So you should check out APA. You should check out some of those other citation areas to see what they are asking for their citation. So we will open the floor up to questions. Please let us know if you have any. And thank you for attending. And we do have a survey that will be sent out in a follow-up email. So please, if you have time, it'll go in the chat too. If you have time, please fill that out. Thank you.